A week had passed since his daughter's birthday, and the fact that he missed the celebration weighed heavily on Babu Achieng, the Chief Magistrate of Nakuru County Law Courts. His demanding job often kept him away from home, but he was determined to be a good father to his 5 children. To make up for missing his bright-eyed daughter's special day, he planned to spend the day with her. While their activities wouldn't be particularly exciting, just running errands, it would still be valuable time together. For Nairobi, his youngest child, simply being with her papa was more than enough. This is the tragic case of Babu Achieng, a Nakuru magistrate who was brutally shot right before her daughter's eyes. 15th January 1999. After completing their errands, father and daughter got into the car for the drive home, making a brief stop to buy milk and bread and some candy, specifically some lollipops, which Nairobi had insisted that she needed to eat. With Nairobi in the car, he rushed into the shop, purchased the items, as Nairobi admired the gift he had bought for her, as well as the one she had received from her older sister. Babu returned to the vehicle after buying the items. He placed them in the passenger's seat. Then, chaos erupted. His daughter Nairobi recalls the sound of a heavy gunfire.
Ran some errands. We went to Kileleshwa, where we owned a house at the time that we rented out. The tenant had a few issues, so we were going to check out the place. And then on our way back home, I don't know if it was my idea or his, but I know we wanted lollipops.
And that very moment, her father collapsed. Nairobi was caught in shock. Not aware, tragically, she became the sole witness to her father's murder. The father was shot once in the head and nothing was stolen from the car. 20 years later, the pain in her eyes remained palpable. Her father fell, and then she saw the men with guns approach the car. They seemed surprised to see Nairobi and debated on what to do. They tossed the little girl out of the vehicle and drove away. In one of her interviews with one of the Kenya media houses, she said that she visibly shudders at the memories flood back. The picture of how she stood beside her dad, confused and terrified, is still as clear as daylight in her mind. She was begging him to wake up as she shook him gently. The onlookers were paralyzed by fear, but fortunately, some neighbors who recognized the little girl took her home to inform her mother. An uncle rushed back to the scene. After his widow was alerted about the incident by her neighbors, they immediately rushed to the scene. They found his body laying on the ground. He was quickly put in a back seat and driven to Nairobi Hospital. The doctors tried to resuscitate him, but sadly, after a few hours, the family was contacted and informed that the Chief Magistrate was already dead. The news of his death spread like bushfire, and the then President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi called upon the police to immediately initiate an investigation towards the assassination. The Attorney General at the time, Amos Wako, assured Kenyans that they would leave no stone unturned until they get the culprits who did the heinous act. Babu had just been transferred to Nakuru Judicial Law Courts. He was forced to travel back to Nairobi Kileleshwa Estate, where he rented for his family every weekend to be with his young family. By then, Nairobi, his youngest daughter, was only 5 years old. At the time, Nairobi's sister Anne was a 17-year-old high school student. When she was called to the principal's office at school, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever.
Called to the sister's office, and because it doesn't happen, I mean, I'd been there for years, I'd never had a one-on-one with the sister, the principal actually. When I saw a family friend there and they were trying to convey it, she was like, oh, Anne, you know, sometimes things happen to parents and, you know, your father. I could tell she was really hesitating, and I actually finished for her. I told her, I asked her, has he died? And that's when they said, yes, he died.
The news about her father's demise was a shocking turn of events, and she had not even one day imagined herself receiving such news. How could her daddy be truly gone? When they confirmed it, Annie's mind raced. Despite her shock, Annie felt a practical urge to worry about her family's future without their dad. She knew their lives would change dramatically. They would be forced to move, and their mother would have to become the sole breadwinner. Babu Achieng's death made front-page news, and home was no longer the sanctuary it was once. Their peace shattered. Visitors came and went, leaving the little room for the family to grieve. There was hardly any space for the family to process their grief. Annie stated that she wanted to go back to school and keep her mind occupied, knowing that excelling academically was the best way to help their family through the hard times ahead. A nationwide manhunt for the culprit had already begun, and after a few weeks, 4 men were arrested in connection to the tragic murder. Among them, John Maina Kinyua, John Njoroge Njagi, Henry Josan, and David Midamo Nderito. The sitting judge highly relied on the confession of a man who claimed to have heard about the murder plot 5 days before the chief magistrate was killed. Although the magistrate's family was initially shielded from many details, the family eventually learned that he had been targeted for murder after refusing a 280,000 Kenyan shillings in order for him to overrule a case he was to sit for. The man who had approached him offering him a bribe was among the 4 suspects. He wanted the chief magistrate to dismiss a case he was ruling on, but turned down the offer. Nairobi said that she barely remembered most of the details, and that being in court was not the hardest thing she had to deal with. What was too difficult for her was being in the same courtroom with the people who made a bad decision of killing Babu Achieng and forcing her to grow up without a father. It was clear that this was not a carjacking. The vehicle was found intact, and Nairobi had emerged unharmed. The suspects had arranged the attack from Nakuru, but it was to be executed in Nairobi. They had spent a night in a Nairobi city hotel before executing their vicious plan. The case first went to court in 2000. The 4 suspects finally disowned their statements, claiming that the police had tortured them. The man who had made a statement claiming that he knew about the plot 5 days before the magistrate's death also disowned his statement. After the initial judge was caught up in a purge in the year 2003, it was declared a mistrial, forcing them to start all over. This occurred between 2003 and 2004 while Annie was in the university. Annie chose not to attend the hearings because their mother wanted to protect the family from facing the people who might have killed their father. However, as the only witness, Nairobi had to attend and testify. At just 12 years old, she struggled to remember much of the incident. Annie, now an advocate, expresses her disappointment at how the case was handled. However, being too naive and young at the same time, She did not realize the extent of the negligence. The investigations were poorly conducted, and the prosecution mishandled the case. The information only came to light many years after. The case was ultimately assigned to Judge Kalpana Rawal. Ultimately, court assessors found no direct link between the accused and the murder, a conclusion upheld by Judge Rawal, known for her integrity. The prosecution brought 15 witnesses, including Naremi, yet overlooked crucial evidence that even an advised lawyer would have noted. The prosecution's negligence was glaring. For instance, they failed to dust the recovered car for fingerprints, which could have linked the accused to the scene. They also did not produce a post-mortem report that would have confirmed that he died from a gunshot wound. There was not enough evidence to certify conviction, and so, finally, the verdict was ruled as not guilty since the prosecution team did not present enough evidence beyond reasonable doubt that indeed the four men committed the felony. In July 2004, the four suspects were declared innocent by the court of law. However, only three were actually free, since Henry Johnson, one of the four suspects, had sometimes died while in prison. Annie believed that the system was being served by her very own father had finally betrayed him. She believed that her family was not served with justice. Judge Rawal is respected. Anyone who had appeared before her knows she is both competent and fair. It was shocking that such a weak case made it to trial, Anne had said. Accepting their reality, the family feels that justice remains elusive. Raised in a deeply religious household, they find comfort in their faith. Narami confesses that for a long time, they kept hoping for a miracle, wishing their father would come back. They have since then come to terms with his absence and is grateful for their own resilience. However, they greatly doubt closure exists in cases like this, especially since he didn't die of natural cause. Their only solace as a family was that Narami wasn't deeply traumatized by witnessing their father's murder at such a tender age. I hope no other family has to endure what we went through, Narami had said. Now, the family chose to celebrate the man he was. My father's personality always shone through, Annie says, her face lighting up with fond memories. She confesses with melancholy that her father greeted everyone, even strangers, and his warmth made everyone gravitate towards him. He was pleasant, social, and had a great sense of humor. His light-heartedness was one reason they felt closer to him than to their mother, who was more of a disciplinarian. If he were alive today, he would be 74 years old. He was truly a wonderful father. And that is the tragic case of the late Chief Magistrate Babu Achieng. Hope you have enjoyed. If there is a case you would want us to cover, write down in the comment section and let me know. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.